Another former top prospect is coming to Baltimore as the Orioles claimed Marco Luciano off waivers this week. We'll give you the scouting report on him coming up on this episode of the Locked On Orioles podcast.
You are Locked On Orioles, your daily Baltimore Orioles podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey there, Orioles fans. Today is Thursday, January 8th, 2026, and welcome back in to the Locked On Orioles podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. As always, I'm your host, Connor Newcomb. And coming up on today's episode, we're going to talk about a couple pieces of Orioles news and notes here late in the week. Marco Luciano is a new Oriole coming over on waivers this week. The Jhonkensy Noel era lasted 2 days. We'll talk about why he was DFA'd so quickly. The O's made an interesting minor league signing in left-hander Eric Torres, and another starting pitcher in terms of the trade market has gone off the board in Edward Cabrera. The Orioles had interest, but he instead goes from the Marlins to the Cubs should the Orioles have tried to beat Chicago's offer. We'll get to all of that and more coming up on this episode of the Locked On Orioles podcast, which is brought to you by FanDuel. The wildcard round is here, and FanDuel is officially in playoff mode. So visit FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL, and grab your profit boost pack every NFL playoff game day. So we got another new Oriole in the fold as we learned on Wednesday that the Orioles had claimed 24-year-old kind of outfielder/infielder Marco Luciano off waivers from the Pittsburgh Pirates to make room for Luciano on the 40-man roster. The Orioles DFA'd outfielder Jhonkensy Noel, who they famously had just claimed off waivers from Cleveland back on Monday. Now, if you missed Tuesday's episode when I talked about Jhonkensy Noel, I kind of broke down, what has gone well and for him in the big leagues, and then also what kind of doomed him to make the Guardians DFA him. And I made it very clear multiple times that Jhonkensy Noel was going to get DFA'd by the Orioles at some point this offseason. I even ranked the next guys to get DFA'd, and I put Noel very clearly number one on that list, whether it was going to be another Orioles signing or potentially another waiver claim. The whole plan for Jhonkensy Noel was for the Orioles to get him on waivers, then DFA him themselves. Hopefully he clears waivers, and then you can keep him in the organization in AAA, but off the 40-man roster and try and work with him and begin him kind of in Norfolk to start the 2026 season. More than likely, that's going to be the same plan with Marco Luciano, who was claimed on waivers on Wednesday to take Noel's spot on the 40-man. So even though in a couple of weeks from now, at the most, Luciano will probably also be designated for assignment by the Orioles, let's talk about what he could bring to Baltimore and who he is. Well, he's 24 years old. He bats right-handed and plays the infield and the outfield. Formerly an international signing out of the Dominican Republic by the San Francisco Giants in 2018, was a pretty big-time international prospect. Got a $2.8 million signing bonus from the Giants, and almost from the jump became one of the top prospects in the Giants system. He was actually their number one ranked prospect for a while. And at times a couple of years ago, Luciano was ranked as high as a top 25 prospect in all of Major League Baseball. Some people saw this guy, especially when he was younger in the minor leagues, as a future star. He made it all the way to AAA at just age 21 back in 2023 and actually debuted in the big leagues that season. Came up for a little bit in July, then came back for the Giants in September of 2023. He was an 84 WRC plus in 45 big league plate appearances that year, just kind of getting his feet wet. But it didn't mean that he was there to stay. Luciano actually did not make the Giants out of camp in 2024 and went back to AAA. Now, he was basically kind of an up and down player for San Francisco that year, had 3 different stints in May, August, and September in the big leagues, had an injury in the middle there, and it ended up only being 81 plate appearances that he had for the Giants. And it didn't really go great. He posted just a 59 WRC plus, meaning he was 41% worse than league average as a hitter. He hit just 211. He didn't hit a home run. He struck out 35% of the time. It didn't really look great in those 27 games he played for the Giants, but he was a former top prospect. He was still only 22 years old. So there was still a lot that you could dream on Luciano. And the Giants again had a fairly middling season in 2025. Luciano again began the year in AAA. I think the assumption was that he would come back to the big leagues, but that didn't happen this time. Luciano spent the entirety of the 2025 season in AAA, and he really wasn't that good. It was 125 games, over 550 plate appearances at the AAA level, and he had just a 96 WRC plus. I mean, he was essentially a league average AAA hitter. And again, he was still only 23 years old, but this is a guy who teams thought was going to potentially be an everyday big league starter and maybe an all-star level player. He slashed 214, 335, 413 in AAA this year. He did hit 23 home runs, which was a new high for him in a minor league season. He did have a 15.3% walk rate, which is super strong and goes along with what we've seen for Luciano's entire career. He also posted a 31% strikeout rate at the AAA level. That is a very concerning AAA strikeout level because 31% is concerning in the majors. And the assumption is if you strike out 31% of the time in AAA, when you get to the big leagues and face much, much better pitchers, that number is only going to go up. And that was really the biggest red flag that we saw in Luciano's full AAA season. Now, in terms of age, like he's still only 24. So if you're looking at a 24-year-old who just spent his entire age 23 season in AAA, that's not anybody who's like outgrown prospect status or, you know, is a has-been or anything. There's plenty of top prospects who are in AAA at that age and looking to get to the big leagues the next year. It's just different for Luciano because all the way back in 2023, he debuted. He's no longer a prospect. He's out of options. And even his numbers in AAA were not very good, which kind of puts him in a different category. Now, there were some changes or some things that at least looked good under the hood in AAA. First big change was he pretty much played exclusively left field in AAA this year. Had always been an infielder, playing mostly shortstop and some second base throughout his pro career. The Giants, he had never played a single inning in the outfield in pro ball, and then he made 107 starts in left field at the AAA level in 2025. So that was something very new for him. He never even played, I think he played one game at first base and otherwise didn't play the infield at all. It was only left field and DH for him last season. And it was a new skill, and he seemed to be okay at it while potentially still having the skills at shortstop in his back pocket. And again, under the hood, like he did have a 45% hard hit rate, a 13% barrel rate. Those are both really, really good numbers at AAA in terms of how hard he was hitting the ball. He chased out of the zone just 20% of the time. That showed some good plate discipline. He had a 114 max exit velocity. That's something you like to see as well. This is a guy who, you know, has hit some balls up near 120 in his minor league career. It's big time pop that you can dream on. And you know, you got to compare him to a player like Jhonkensy Noel because the Orioles are doing the same thing with both these guys in the span of 1 week. You know, Luciano was a much higher rated prospect than Noel ever was, but, you know, they're big power guys with big strikeout issues in their times in the big leagues. Noel chases out of the zone. Luciano does not. That is the biggest difference between the two. The issue is Luciano swings and misses a ton in the zone. He's got a 24% in-zone whiff rate. That would be the second worst in Major League Baseball if that's the number he had posted in the big leagues this year. Now, you can have success with numbers like that. The worst in-zone whiff percentage guy in the majors is Rafael Devers. He's known as a pretty good all-star level hitter. So that approach can work, especially if you have an elite batting eye like Devers does. He doesn't swing out of the zone and he walks a ton. Luciano has that. He doesn't swing out of the zone and he walks a ton. So the question is, how do you put all that together and turn him into the player that he was thought to be when he was a top 25 prospect in Major League Baseball? Something that Devers does is kind of eliminating one part of the strike zone and focusing on doing damage everywhere else. So you already know you have a great eye for what's a ball and what's a strike. You're already really good at laying off balls and swinging at strikes. That's something Luciano can do. Now it's just, can you swing at the right strikes? That is a different level of plate discipline. Rafael Devers just really doesn't swing at a lot of pitches that are on the outside third of the plate, that he knows he can't do as much damage on those things. He lays off. He waits for a pitcher to come middle in, and he just destroys everything there. And that's how he gets himself to an all-star level at the plate. Now, Luciano doesn't hit balls up in the zone at all. So his focus should be, if it's up, I lay off, I focus middle down, and I drive the ball. Now, it's easier said than done, and I'm sure plenty of hitting coaches in his past have tried to get him to do that with no success at this point at age 24. Maybe it's something that the Orioles, who've been really good at working with swing decisions, can lock him into if they can keep him in the minor leagues. Now, he is out of options for the first time ever this offseason, which is why he ended up on waivers, why the Giants DFA'd him back in December. The Pirates claimed him. They held him for 2 weeks. Then they DFA'd him to make roster room. They were trying to do what the O's are trying to do, is sneak him through waivers. And after the holiday kind of waiver freeze, which is why it took 3 weeks for Luciano to find a new team, he is now on the Orioles. And as I said, they're going to do the same thing with Marco Luciano that they just did with Jhonkensy Noel this week. They're going to claim him on waivers, and then the next time they either find another guy on waivers they like, or they make another trade or sign another free agent this offseason, Marco Luciano takes the number one spot of next player to be DFA'd off the currently full Orioles 40-man roster. They are going to, just like with Noel, try to sneak him, pass him through waivers, hope no other team claims him. And if that's the case and he does clear waivers, he will have to stay in the Orioles organization at AAA, but will no longer count against the 40-man roster. And then you can have some depth with him being there in big league spring training. And left-handed reliever Josh Walker, we just learned that he cleared waivers. The Orioles did this exact thing with him. He cleared waivers. Now he stays in the organization as kind of lefty relief depth in AAA and will at least compete for a spot in big league spring training with the Orioles as well. They hope the same for Luciano. If he does stick around, how would he help the Orioles? Probably just gives you some more high upside position player depth. I mean, he's always hit the ball hard, even had a 46% hard hit rate in the limited time in the big leagues in 2024. Yes, it's just 81 plate appearances, but that is rocking the baseball in the bigs. He does not have an issue with chasing out that side of the strike zone. And again, he's a former top prospect, and he is still only 24 years old. This is a guy that may not even be in his athletic or baseball peak yet. So you hope that you can kind of catch lightning in a bottle with him if you can hold on to him. Maybe you change the swing a little bit and unlock some of that former top prospect. He's always been athletic. He's always hit the ball hard. He's always had good bat speed. He can now play the infield and the outfield, which makes him more versatile. There's been some injuries to his back and other places that have slowed him down in the minor leagues, but he seems much healthier now, which is nice as well. And maybe, you feel okay with him in the outfield, along with having the ability to play shortstop and second base. That can give you some depth on the roster, and maybe he can help your team at some point. And if you're kind of comparing him to Jhonkensy Noel, I see it being easier for Luciano to kind of figure it out and get back to being some sort of impact player than it would be for Noel. And you can trust Luciano more defensively, so it's easier to just put him in a lineup if that's something you'd want to do down the road. Again, they're just trying to acquire depth in AAA, these interesting guys. This is something they did with Ryan O'Hearn, and that really, really worked out for 3 years. And there's going to be more of those guys who potentially come in. They're hoping both Noel and Luciano could maybe be some of those guys who have not that they're counting on them at all, just the chance to help the Orioles potentially in 2026. When you see him DFA'd in a week from now, if you listen to this show, then you know ball, and you're not going to be surprised at what the Orioles are doing. But the other way that the O's and every team in Major League Baseball like to add depth to their roster is through minor league signings as well. Not as much kind of risk with the minor league signing of losing the player, right? You can just kind of get him in your organization. And they did that with left-handed reliever Eric Torres last week. We'll tell you about him coming up next. But first, this episode of the Locked On Orioles podcast is brought to you by FanDuel. The wild card round is here, and FanDuel is officially in playoff mode. Every game day during the NFL playoffs, FanDuel is giving customers even more ways to get in on the action. Because right now, every NFL playoff game day, FanDuel users get a profit boost pack waiting for them inside the app. Each game day, you'll see a pack loaded with multiple profit boosts that you can apply to the bets you like most. If the only way you're going to watch football this weekend is to maybe throw a boost on a game because you're really sad that the Ravens aren't there, because Tyler Loop has doomed your franchise, or maybe set it in the right direction considering what happened after, well, you can still have a lot of fun watching the games and through FanDuel. You make your picks, then you apply your profit boosts, and you go after even bigger payouts while the playoffs get rolling. So visit FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL, and grab your profit boost pack every NFL playoff game day. So we'll talk about the Orioles signing Eric Torres to a minor league deal in just a moment. But first, I want to talk about the Everydayer Club. I want to thank you for making Locked On Orioles your first listen of the day. And thank you for making Locked On now the #1 sports podcast network. Now, you already live your team every day. Now it's time to take it up a level and go ad-free. Join the Everydayer Club today and get Locked On Orioles with no interruptions, members-only Discord access, and more, all for just $5 per month, or to save a little money, $50 per year. So go to lockedonorioles.supercast.com or check the link down in the show notes to learn more about joining the Everydayer Club. So the Orioles added some depth in other ways as well last week, reportedly signing 26-year-old left-hander reliever Eric Torres to a minor league deal with an invite to big league spring training. Now, who is Eric Torres? He is 26. He was a former 14th round pick of the Angels back in 2021 out of Kansas State. He has been a reliever the entire time in professional ball, never has once started a game. So, you know, he is a relief pitcher. Got to AAA in 2023 at age 23. Didn't go great. 33 2/3 innings in AAA as a reliever. Had a 9.62 ERA with 42 strikeouts to 43 walks. Is just an absurd amount of walks in that stretch. It's almost unbelievable. Then you add the fact that he also hit 7 batters in there as well. The amount of free passes was kind of unmatched. It's always been like a funky kind of low slot lefty delivery with even though the fastball's 91, 92, it's good stuff to go with it. It's deceptive, but sometimes this guy just has no idea where the ball is going. He was sent back down to AA in 2024, and he kind of found it again. He had a 2.31 ERA in 35 innings. He was still walking guys, but his walk rate dropped from 23% to 12% to go along with a 36% crazy elite strikeout rate. Opponents hit just 173 against him. It was like, all right, he figured it back out. Let's send him back to AAA. He's 24 years old at the end of the season. He goes up to AAA for 7 1/3 innings and walks 11 batters and hits 1 with 8 strikeouts and 7 runs allowed. And the Angels are like, okay, this might be a good AA pitcher who can't make it in AAA and therefore is not going to make it in the majors. So the Angels released him during spring training in 2025. But Torres was not done playing. He ended up finding his way into independent ball, and he signed with the Lake County Dockhounds in the American Association of Independent Ball, and he was dominant. 39 2/3 innings this year of relief in indie ball, had a 1.59 ERA, 64 strikeouts is an insane number. 29 walks is still a lot of walks in about 40 innings, but much better than it was in affiliated ball. The last time we saw him pitch in affiliated ball 2024, it was kind of sinker at 91, changeup at 89, slider at 76, curveball at 75, and also had previously thrown a 4-seam fastball. So that's kind of the mix we have from him now. He loves to throw that changeup against righties. They can't really hit it, and then throw the slider to lefties as well. He continued his pro career in different leagues by signing with a Puerto Rican Winter League team this winter. Now, the top winter league really is the Dominican Winter League, and then you have some guys who go to Australia, some go to Venezuela, some also go to Puerto Rico. It's not one of the better winter leagues, but there is major league talent there. And he was essentially unhittable in the Puerto Rican Winter League. Now, again, he's not facing major league level hitters night in, night out, but he still went 23 1/3 innings without allowing a run in the Puerto Rican Winter League. He allowed just 6 hits, struck out 39 batters, and the big one, he walked just 7. Now, he also hit 5 batters, but still not terrible compared to what it used to be. He was named the Rookie of the Year in the Puerto Rican Winter League this winter. The Orioles liked that and signed him to a minor league contract. So he'll come to big league camp. Again, he still hasn't made his major league debut, has a chunk of innings in AAA, but never beyond that. Still only 26, and he'll be relief depth in AAA from the left side. And the Orioles, as we've talked about this offseason, I still feel like they need to add one more reliever, and I still feel like they could be targeting a lefty, because you look at the state of their bullpen among lefties, it's right now Keegan Aiken, Dietrich Enns, and Grant Wolfram are the top 3, and no guarantee that all 3 of those guys would even be in the opening day bullpen. There's still not a kind of lockdown, definitely feel great about him being a setup man lefty like there had been in recent years when, Cianel Perez and Danny Coulomb and Gregory Soto were filling those roles for the Orioles. They hope it could be Dietrich Enns, but they kind of don't have that guy right now. So there's an opening for lefties. Josh Walker is still in the organization. He's going to be in the mix. And now you have a guy like Eric Torres. If he can figure out the command like he did in Puerto Rico this winter, he can maybe potentially have a shot to help out the Orioles. But there's never such thing as too much pitching depth, and Torres adds to that, at least, the very worst, a nice depth reliever to have in AAA Norfolk this year if you do need him at some point. But we know the Orioles are continuing to build their depth, both on the position player side with Luciano and the pitching side with Torres, two guys who could end up just kind of being in AAA Norfolk for the entirety of the 2026 season. But we also know that the O's are still interested in making the major league team a lot better and still interested in adding another starting pitcher to the big league rotation. One of the guys that they had previously showed interest in is now off the board. Edward Cabrera traded from the Marlins to the Cubs on Wednesday. We'll talk about that deal, if the Orioles would have done it, especially after the Shane Baz trade, and kind of where we think they sit at this point, at least when it comes to the trade market. But first, this episode of the Locked On Orioles podcast is also brought to you by Rocket Money. Let's be real. Managing your finances can feel overwhelming. Between subscriptions you forgot about, bills that keep going up, and trying to figure out where all your money actually goes each month, it's easy to feel like you're losing control. And who has time to track every transaction or hunt down hidden fees? That's where Rocket Money comes in, the personal finance app that helps you take control. It finds and cancels your unwanted subscriptions, monitors your spending, and helps lower your bills so you can grow your savings. I was honestly shocked when Rocket Money showed me what I was paying for with all these subscriptions, some of them that I just wasn't using anymore, and I completely forgot about. It has already saved me money. So let Rocket Money help you reach your financial goals faster. Join at rocketmoney.com/lockedon. That's rocketmoney.com/lockedon. One more time, rocketmoney.com/lockedon. So let's finish things out today with the Edward Cabrera trade. News broke on Wednesday and was made official by both teams. The Miami Marlins traded starting pitcher Edward Cabrera to the Chicago Cubs in exchange for three prospects: outfielder Owen Casey, shortstop Christian Hernandez, and right-handed hitting kind of corner infielder Edgardo De Leon. So I talk about this because A, Cabrera was one of the better starting pitchers available on the trade market this offseason. The Orioles have been and continue to be looking to upgrade their starting rotation. And the Orioles had already been connected to Cabrera earlier this offseason. Back in December, Ken Rosenthal had a report and wrote a story in The Athletic that the Orioles were engaged in trade talks with the Marlins for Cabrera. Now, granted, that report was before the Orioles made the trade with the Rays to acquire Shane Baz. And after the O's made the Baz trade, there was a report from the Miami Herald that the Orioles were one of a couple teams who are now no longer in talks with the Marlins trying to acquire Cabrera. And that kind of makes sense, right? Now, I don't think it was impossible that the Orioles still could have had interest in Cabrera and still could have gotten him this offseason. He's 27-year-old right-handed pitcher, 28 in April, still has 3 years of team control left, similar to Baz. He's got great stuff, high 90s fastball, good changeup, really, really strong swing and miss breaking balls. He threw 137 and 2/3 innings in 2025. That was also by far a career high at the big league level for Cabrera. Just like Baz, he's had some injury issues, but you could argue probably more injury issues. He's kind of closer to a Grayson Rodriguez recent injury history than he is to a Shane Baz one, where it hasn't been as many of like hey, it's going to be full Tommy John, you're going to miss a year and change. It's like these different things that come up for Edward Cabrera. But the stuff is undeniable, and one of the better stuff guys who was left. Now, if you're watching here on the Locked On Orioles YouTube channel, this is my starting pitching matrix from the offseason. I don't have it updated with Cabrera, but I had him 10th on my trade list. I had Shane Baz 7th. So yeah, if the Orioles were choosing between Baz and Cabrera, you just look at my list. I would prefer what the Orioles did in going to get Shane Baz. But again, not out of the question that they could have done this deal as well. And you can kind of look at this either way. Hey, would you have done this deal while still having Baz? Because Cabrera was in that group of guys where I was like, hey, if the Orioles also trade for one of these Cabrera, Pivetta, Mackenzie Gore types, along with Baz and Eflin, I would say, yeah, that's a good offseason. Not an amazing, stellar offseason, but good enough for me. It's not something I'd say the Orioles didn't do enough to address their rotation. The issue with Cabrera is he just never really had a full season, and you want to get guys at this point who you're banking on more innings for in 2026, and that's just not something Edward Cabrera would have given the Orioles. Now, what the Cubs gave up, these three prospects. First one, 23-year-old left-handed hitter Jhonkensy. He's an outfielder, former top 100 prospect. He was number 65 overall at FanGraphs in 2024. Now a 45 future value guy, the Cubs' number 5 prospect. Debuted in the majors this year with the Cubs, played only 12 games, didn't really do much, but he raked in AAA with a 139 WRC+. Kind of a corner outfielder, huge power from the left side, but a lot of swing and miss in his game. Next prospect, 22-year-old right-handed hitting shortstop Christian Hernandez, also a former top prospect, former top 100 prospect. He was ranked number 100 at FanGraphs in 2023. Now just a 35-plus future value guy and the 23rd prospect in the Cubs system at FanGraphs. Spent his first full year at high A at age 21 this year and was a league average hitter at 99 WRC+. Great fielder in the infield, good speed, pop in the bat, but there's major hit tool questions on all the swing and miss that he has in his game. And the final prospect was 18-year-old right-handed hitting corner infielder Edgardo De Leon. He was a Cubs 2024 international signing out of the Dominican Republic. He was in the DSL in 24. He was in the Complex League in 2025. Hit really well in both leagues, but had a lot of strikeouts both years. Currently not ranked at FanGraphs for Cubs prospects. Not really a huge money signing from that international class either, but has shown good stats in his 2 years in the pros. So I would, one side would argue the Orioles gave up more for Shane Baz. You could probably argue that than the Cubs did for Cabrera. You could also argue that Baz is better and more reliable than Cabrera. And it all depends on what you think of Jhonkensy. Because among those two trades, Jhonkensy is far and away the best prospect that was moved. The Marlins got more kind of hanging on one prospect in Casey, while the Rays got 4 players and a draft pick and kind of spreading out the talent they got back for Baz in the Orioles deal. So if you tried to put together an Orioles equivalent for this deal, if they were to either right now go get Cabrera, or if they hadn't done the Baz deal and instead had tried to get Cabrera in the first place, which we knew they were trying to, Dylan Beavers does feel like a very high equivalent for Jhonkensy. You have a corner outfielder, left-handed hitter, made his major league debut. He's a very different type hitter than Casey is, and Casey definitely has a higher ceiling, has always been a better prospect. I would say Vahiva Aloy would be in that deal. He's similar in age, level, and kind of scouting report to Christian Hernandez. The difference is just that Aloy has not bottomed out in the minors, whereas Hernandez maybe in like 2024 kind of did that, which took away his prospect status. Aloy, I think, clearing away a better prospect than Christian Hernandez, but you're trying to make up for the gap between Beavers and Casey, and I think Aloy would do it. And it's also very clear the Marlins pretty high on a Christian Hernandez bounce back if they are trading for him in this deal, so they probably think of him as higher than the general public does. And then the third player would be Wilfie De La Cruz. I think it's a nice comp to Edgardo De Leon. They were both in the same Cubs international signing class in 2024. De La Cruz, 17-year-old infielder the O's got in the Andrew Kittredge trade this year. A teenager with good numbers in rookie ball and upside. And again, probably a little bit higher regarded prospect than De Leon, but helps you make up for the difference between Beavers and Casey. Maybe to kind of beat the deal, you'd have to throw in like another intriguing arm, like a Sebastian Gongora type from a little bit lower in the system. Maybe not. But again, my equivalent would be Beavers, Aloy, and De La Cruz. You compare that to the 4 players in the pick the Orioles got for Baz, who I think, again, is a little bit better than Edward Cabrera. And I think it's fairly similar-ish. Maybe the Cubs got away with one, but we will see how durable someone like Cabrera is. So, think about that. Those 3 guys, would you give that up for Cabrera? Would you have done it before the Baz trade, kind of instead of the Baz trade? And also, would you do it after the Baz trade to also add Cabrera to Shane Baz and Zach Eflin? But that'll do it for today's episode. Thank you so much for tuning in. That should do it for the week, unless we get some Orioles news here on Thursday evening or Friday that warrants an episode. I will be back on Monday to continue the player season reviews and the offseason coverage here for the Orioles. But remember, we are doing a giveaway here on the Locked On Orioles YouTube channel. Thank you for getting me over 10,000 YouTube subscribers. We are giving away some Orioles memorabilia. There's going to be more than one winner on this giveaway as well. I've got a Jim Palmer replica statue, to give away over here. I've got a Cal Ripken Jr. replica Hall of Fame plaque to give away. I got some other bobbleheads behind me that are going to be given away as well. You just have to do two things to enter the giveaway. Number one is subscribe to the Locked On Orioles podcast on YouTube. Number two is leave a comment on YouTube on either today's episode or any other episode earlier this week. And I just want to hear your honest thoughts about the podcast, about the show, whether it's the presentation, the content, myself, the audio and video, the posting schedule, whatever it may be. I want to hear your honest feedback, whether you've been listening for 5 years, whether you found me after the Pete Alonso deal, whatever it may be. I want to hear your honest feedback of the show. We're into a new year. The Orioles are certainly into a new era. I want to see if this podcast needs to kind of go into a new era with some upgrades as well. Your feedback is certainly appreciated. And of course, getting over 10,000 subscribers, very appreciated as well. Otherwise, if you're an audio listener, always make sure to subscribe and follow the show. Leave a 5-star rating and a review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. That really helps us out. And if you have questions about the show, you want to know more maybe about how to get involved with the Everydayer Club, you want to ask Orioles questions, talk some ball, you can always email me, lockedonorioles@gmail.com. Again, unless there's more Orioles news Thursday or Friday, I'll be back on Monday. Until then, I'm Connor Newcomb, and this has been the Locked On Orioles podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.